to the 31st Hayley-Roxanna Crafts quick cross stitch video, where I share information, hints and tips on one area of cross stitch in a short video. In this video, I'm focusing on using variegated threads in your cross stitching. Variegated thread is a stranded cotton that has been dyed with more than one plain colour. It can be shades of the same colour, like in these threads, or it could be a rainbow of colours. These threads here are from my Disney Cross Stitch magazine collection by Hachette Partworks, but many of the brands that sell the plain stranded cottons also sell variegated ones, so DMC and Anchor for example. But there are also independent brands that hand dye thread. Variegated thread can be used to add interest and dimension to your work. In this duo sampler from the Disney Cross Stitch magazine, variegated thread has been used in this Flounder and Sebastian picture to create these waves. The beauty with variegated thread is that everyone's finished cross stitching will look slightly different even when stitching the same design. When I'm working with variegated thread, I try to cut a length that runs the whole range of colours. So with this green thread, I try to cut a length that was sort of halfway through the lightest of the colours, right through to halfway through the darkest of the shades. This is just because for me, this makes it easier when I need to match up the threads. If I'm working a section and run out of the thread part the way through and need to start a new thread, it's just easier to match up the shades so you don't suddenly go from the lightest to the very darkest, so you can keep that variation. Variegated thread can be separated in the same way as your regular stranded cotton, so you can work with however many strands you are required to work with. However, if you normally use the loop start where you fold one strand in half to make two strands, it is worth noting that you cannot do this with variegated thread, as you'd lose the subtle variations along the strand. When stitching with variegated thread, if you want a slow variation of tone and more control, it is best to stitch using the English method. So this is where you complete one whole cross stitch at a time. So you'd stitch in the one direction and then come back and stitch the other direction before moving on to the next cross. And this is what I've done in this example here. So I stitched each cross individually. This can take a little longer to do, but ensures the colour changes gradually through your stitches. You can also stitch with variegated thread using the Danish method, which I've done here. And this is where you complete all the bottom stitches for your row and then come back completing all the top stitches. As you can see, it gives a slightly different look and appearance, and this is probably more effective when the strand is shades of one colour than if you're working with a strand of different colours of thread, as the different colours may be too contrasting. The length of each row stitch would also affect how the changes of colour looked if you're working with the Danish method. So a longer row, you might get more contrast between the top and the bottoms of your crosses, certainly in certain areas. Whilst variegated thread can make your finished cross stitch more interesting and individual, there are some drawbacks. Firstly, variegated thread can be more expensive than single colour threads. And secondly, if you run out of a variegated thread in the middle of a project, it can be harder to find another skein that will match due to the nature of these threads. However, they can be a lot of fun to experiment with in different designs if you have the opportunity to use them. And I would try the different methods for working with them, the English method and the Danish method. And you can even work down with them rather than across. All these have been done horizontally, but you could work vertically with them or in diagonals to create different designs. So you just have to have a play around with them and decide what's going to work best for you and your project. If you have any questions about using variegated thread in your cross stitching, please pop them in the comments. In the next quick cross stitch video, I will share some tips for using metallic thread in your cross stitching.